So good morning from my part also. Komoran. And I'm very sorry to say to you that I will not speak of open dialogue. If you really become pissed off or confused about it, so I can in the afternoon show a piece of film of open dialogue also, because it's really nearly connected with the things that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to speak of a research project that I'm involved at the moment, a very, very interesting research project in which we try to look how the relational mind is constructed in a therapy situation in which there are two therapists and a couple needing for help. And in many ways this is a very extraordinary research idea, because I think that at the moment we are living a very important time in human history, perhaps even more important time than we realize. There are of course many things that we need to be worried about in the life in the global world, in our treatment systems and so on, but at the same time we are living a time in which we go across this Descartesian dualism in a very concrete way. And in my mind, this is my claim that I also want to focus a bit today, is that actually we are for the first time having access to have a kind of comprehensive description of how is life, and of course how is the life in our therapy settings, but also how is the life on the whole, including our body, to be involved. And that's the idea. What I'm going to focus. It's called Relational Mind. Relational Mind is a concept of Gregory Bateson. And the background of this research project is that in Finland, the biggest funder of scientific research, called basic scientific research, is Finnish Academy of Science. And some 3 years ago, they announced a program, proposals for research on human mind from a multidisciplinary, multi-scientific point of view, having an idea to taking use of the modern neuroscience. And then we are a group of people that we call our sort of European Family Therapy Research Group. And we got an idea that why not to propose a research of a relational mind. We think that mind is constructed in relation, and at the same time we as human persons are constructed of those relationships. And we made a research plan, and all of a sudden we got a very good funding of a research. I've never got this big amount of money of doing research. So it's very confusing, because on my career of research and of course in developing this psychiatric practice, I'm been a bit on the side track, and now all of a sudden I'm in the mainstream. So it's very interesting to try to look what happens here. This is the people who are with me in the research doing this idea. It's very much based on the outcomes of the research of intersubjectivity in many ways. I do not go into details about it, but it's very important to realize that the study that has shown that life from the very beginning is a dialogical one. We're born into life. What we have an innate capacity is to be involved in a dialogical relationship. And of course that's an amazing idea of human life. We need two things. We need to learn to breathe, and we need to learn how to be in dialogical relationship. And that's an innate capacity of human being for the first half years of life. And following this idea actually could mean tremendous idea of understanding how human life is constructed, and of course how do we build up our services. For me, the most important author in this respect is Colvin Trevarthen. He's a biologist working in the University of Edinburgh. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Colvin Trevarthen's work. Could you raise your hands? Oh my God. Go immediately to Google and YouTube and take a look at this. This man is worth of Nobel Prize, because he really opened up the door to look at this relational part of human life. And he's not a psychologist, he's a biologist, and his main idea is that we tune. Life is not psychology, life is music, and he shows pieces of film in which he shows that from the very beginning, the mother or the father and the newborn baby, they start to be in a very melodical, rhythmical relationship with each other. And it's very much this music that lives in our bodies, through which we attune to each other in a rhythmic way, in a jazz-like rhythmic way, as Colin Trovarten is saying, not in the marsh, but something else. Another good name to remember is a Norwegian social psychologist, Stein Bråten, who also is very much shown that our brain are dialogically constructed, and he speaks of this virtual other, that the other is with us when he is not be there. Of course, Michael Bachtin also talked of the intersubjectivity. Speaking of intersubjective consciousnesses, it's not so much the individual, but the intersubjective consciousnesses between human beings. And when Michael Bachtin is saying that I never can learn myself by myself, but I need your eyes to know who I am. I borrow your eyes to see myself. And if we think what happens, and what is also important in our research project, is to look at the life in milliseconds, because we have the response in the eyes of the other in milliseconds. And how do we respond to that, looking in the eyes? For instance, there are already now some research that is measuring, as we are measuring, the autonomic nervous system of clients and therapists. And if there is a therapy session, and there is a therapist and a client, and all of a sudden the therapist makes notes and turns his eyes down, it interrupts the relationships. And the client immediately responds in her autonomic nervous system about it. So that it's a really concrete eye that we are connected with eyes. Having in mind in our conversation yesterday when you said that in Japan it's not allowed to look at the eyes. It's very interesting question. How do you take care of this part of the relationship? Of course, in mirror neuron research, the same idea is a part of the idea. So there's a lot of things that say this. When a newborn baby comes into the world, the first language for her is the language of movement, especially a philosopher and dance therapist also being Maxine Cheech Johnston, perhaps originally a nurse, has been writing and doing research of that when he says that movement is the first language. In movement, we do two things. First of all, a newborn baby in movements regulate her affective arousal. When something is lacking here or something too much here, she starts to move. And it's a voice, it's a noise, it's a voice, it's a movement. And then there is a mother or a father and comes and what's wrong with you? And when she moves and tries to regulate her affective arousal, it's a communication act. And this is the moment of goodbye of individuality, because thereafter there no longer can be a limit, because the other one comes a part of my emotional arousal, regulation of my emotional arousal. In that way, that's a basis of intersubjective idea of the life on the whole. All the time in our affects, the other ones are there in many ways, in real relationship, but of course in inner relationships. So we can think that there is 3 steps. There are movements, there are affects, there are emotions. In psychotherapy world, we have been very occupied of this concept of emotions. But actually, when we speak of emotions, we speak of thoughts. Emotions are formulations, or are something that are formulated in thoughts, and it's already a kind of a story. But in between, there is something that is, for me and for our research project, much more interesting. I know that this word affect is not accurate because it's very nearby emotion. That's what I learned of the native English-speaking people. Perhaps it's more a kind of word sensing or something like that. Something that happens in my body when I experience something. If we speak of emotions, I can say that I became so sad when you say so sad bad things of me. That's a description of emotion. And psychotherapy has been a field in which that has been the basic idea. And when someone is telling that, so there is a therapist and a client, and they give a meaning for that emotions. But the more important and interesting issue for me is to what happens in a situation when all of a sudden I become moved and I can't breathe and I have tears in my eyes. And that's the moment when my body starts to speak to me and to all of us something that we do not have words yet. And that's the moment that we try to grasp in our research process. And I think that this is the most important for psychotherapy. It's not so important to when we, for instance, focusing on narratives and stories. It's much more important to focus on things that do not have story or narrative. And that's my body. That's the point of time when my body is talking. Every emotions, they live in my body. If we call symptoms, they are reactions of my body. There is concrete research, for instance, showing that if people hear voices, you can in one way recognize that in the body function somewhere. William James, it's a very important author here because he was already on this track 100 years ago. Some others were also, but at that time there was a big choice made in psychology, and it was chosen the empiristic idea instead of following the idea of looking the stream of life, as is the most famous book of William James. Stream of life, stream of consciousness. Our experiences are feelings of tendency, often so vacuum that we are unable to name that all. We sense things and we do not name them, we do not give name, but those sensing and making differences and finding differences and similarities in our sensing is the basic idea of life. And life goes on all the time, and you cannot separate the things exactly the same way as Nora showing her film was saying that, and William James is joking that what do empirists if he's looking and making a research of a rabbit, a river? So does empirist make that he takes the wave away from the river and then put it into the box and made an analysis how is wave constructed and then put that wave back into the river? That's senseless. And for James, as we also try to grasp in our research, we'll try to look things in the happenings, in the stream when everything happens. When we speak of intersubjectivity, there is an important idea, and this is I'm a bit, let's say, critical to the most big part of the writings of intersubjectivity. It's quite natural that they look at this dyadic relationship. There is a mother, a baby, a father, a baby. But it can be a bit non-valid to the real life, because real life is not dyadic. We all the time, from the very beginning, live in a multiplicity of relationships. And it's so important to see how things happen in the multiplicity. We define the multiplicity of having 4 persons present in the meeting. Elisabeth Vivade-Beursing is the most famous doing research of that. Again, all these names are easily you can find pieces of their work in YouTube and so on. Sarah Hurdy is an anthropologist who is saying that whole village is needed to rise up a child. It's not a question of mother or father rising up the child, but all the relationships that are there. I myself have tried to conclude all this in this knife picture. I will not go into the details, but only to repeat the idea that there are 2 ways to understand 2 important elements of this relation, our life in relationships. all the time we live in relationships, interreal relationships in which we have conversations or meeting with our clients, or for instance here in these a bit unnaturalistic relationships, but still. These relationships that we experience here are the most important for us at the moment. And at the same time, we have all the relationships that we have experienced in our life from the very beginning in our life with us. Not in defined way, but our bodies remembers everything that we have experienced. The touch of the mother, the smell, the friend, and all those ideas. And when we speak of the voices of the mind, as here, voices of a mind of a depressed client who came into the therapy, I think that they are not only metaphor, they are very concrete relational experiences that we store in the memory of our body. In the way, for instance, in Portugal, and a neuroscientist Damasio has described as a kind of in different senses of the ideas. But for me, this is the basis also for the research project, because we try to look at both parts, what happens between these four persons, two therapists, two clients, on the horizontal, and at the same time grasp what happens inside of them in the vertical way of their experiences. Daniel Stern was a psychoanalyst, and he had a very strong. He was very much writing of the same issues, but still in a dyadic way. But he had a very strong saying about it. He says that we are living a revolution. We are experiencing revolution. The new view assumes that the mind is always embodied in and made possible by the sensory motor activity of the body. Mind is intersubjectively open since it is partially constituted through its interaction with other minds. So I can understand that for a psychoanalyst this is a revolution, but of course we who have been working in a family therapy world and familiar with Gregory Bateson's idea and all, this is not that big revolution, but still it's a new step onwards into the science. We already have the understanding of relational part of life, also a bit of this embodied part of life, but not so much, and perhaps this is the core message in our research also, that we are relational and we are embodied. Everything that we have in our bodies are there in the relationships, and they are also in the relationships. There are some research, I will not go so much in details about it. If I can give these slides so you can have the references to look after, who already have started to look this embodied part of and rhythmic attunement between therapist and a client, mostly between one therapist, one client. This is very important for me to realize that when there has been a measurement of the autonomic nervous system, how clients react, they do not react what the therapist is saying, but they react how the therapist is saying. It's the prosody of the speech that make the things happening. When I speak here, so I have a higher voice and lower voice, and I have breaks and all those kind of things in my saying. And those are the things that our clients react. And this has been verified in the nervous system. For instance, Anssi Peräkylä, professor in Helsinki University, has made a research in which they have tried to register how clients react to the reformulation of the therapist. If therapist in a cognitive analytic therapy is formulating only the words of the client, that the voice of the therapist is on the same scale level, but immediately when the therapist tries to say something, make an interpretation or reformulation, the voice of the therapist is coming higher. And the clients are reacting that. Now they know, now it's something coming. When the rise go up. And it's very, very good knowledge for us as a therapist to realize that our clients all the time follow, not what we say, but in what way we say it. Another important part of the study is this Ramsayer and Zacher Wolfgang Zacher is the main researcher. He has very much doing the research, for instance, showing that the synchronization of movements between therapists and the clients are related with how do the clients and therapists feel the alliance, working alliance, and consequently related with the outcome of the therapy. The more the therapist and clients synchronize their movements, the better the outcome has been. Okay, now I'm going to go into our research project and show some examples about it also. We are very happy to have international. We mainly work in our university, but we have an international research group. Maria Borgsa in university from Germany, Evrinomia Avdi from Thessaloniki, and John Sotter is a kind of philosophical consult in our research project. And I think that John's message especially is to all the time ask if we look at the life as a part of the stream of life and not to isolate the phenomenon that we try to look at it. And well, that's something I already said. It's very much the idea came out of Gregory Bateson's work, and what does it mean? What we do, we try to look at the comprehensive phenomenon of dialogue. We try to look, and not only try that, but we are looking at what happens in the dialogue, in the speech, in the conversation between the participants in the very moment of change. Then we look at what happens in the inner dialogue of the participants. We try to grasp, there are always at least 2 sessions in couple therapy in which there is a measurement of autonomic nervous system, and thereafter all the 4 are invited in the individual interview, and they are asked, what did you think at this very specific point of time in which the research has noticed something change taking place. And then the third part, we look at what happens in our bodies in that conversation. Not only by the clients, but also within the therapist. And this is a relational. There are some studies who have been interested in what happens on clients in family therapy, for instance, couple therapy, for instance. John Gottman has developed this idea. But for me, it's a quite important question. Why do they exclude the therapist from looking? Because it's really, we respond to each other in our body, attuning to each other in our bodies. So we look at the social, psychological, and biological, if you want to call it that way. We have chosen to look at couple therapy. When we started off this research, it was quite surprising. Many of the people that are now doing neuroscience, they were so astonished at how in the whole world you could have an idea to simultaneous measurement of autonomic nervous system. Because in neuroscience, you only look one person at time, and it was difficult to find equipment, tools to do this research. Now it's coming a new field too, and there are more tools also doing it. But we did find that we want to have a multi-actor setting, but to make it be realistic, we did not choose a family therapy, but a couple therapy setting. There are 2 therapists and 2 clients, and all these therapists can work whatever they are, however they are working. So they are not given any manual or advices that this is the way you need to do. And most of our therapists are working a bit, let's say, narrative ways. Of course, I'm also in 3 of the cases with here, and I of course work in a dialogical way. And they are very precisely video recorded with 6 cameras, so that we have facial expression of each person, and in addition we have films of the embodied ways of being in the situation. And 2 sessions we measure the autonomic nervous system, meaning this is a picture of the. We have a picture of the faces. You can see it there. Here is a shared moment, and then we have this setting of looking at the therapist and the clients. What we look at 3 points taking place in the session. First we look how is the heartbeat of all participants. Every participant, before they come into the meeting, 1 day before the session, they have a heartbeat recorder, and they have this heartbeat recorder until 1 day after. So they have it 3 days time. There's a kind of base level of your heart level. And there is a measurement that is very much used in occupational health or sports, looking at this welfare analysis. How do our body relax from a stress, and how does our body react in a stressful situation? And there are many other things that you can also measure of this heartbeat recorder. Actually, what I have known is that there are many things that have surprised me when starting to look. But one, perhaps let's say a positive surprise, has been to understand how important organ heart is. So it's not only poetry or things when we sing that of love and emotions and heart, because it's very concrete. It's our heartbeat that makes the feelings. It's a blood pressure and difference of the blood pressure that makes the emotions to arise. So it's a much more, and concretely much more important organ that I have been thinking. And we have an interest, how do our heartbeat synchronize to each other? Then we look at this most traditional measurement, we used to call it skin conductance. It's no longer called as skin conductance, it's called as electrodermal activity. And it's the most sensitive measurement of empathetic attunement to each other. I will show you examples about it. And then we look at the preheating in the sessions. Yeah, at the moment we have 10 couples, actually 11 couples nowadays, and 4 in Thessaloniki and 4 in Germany. When we started off the research, we had this is an example of a research that has been done in Germany, and there is a kind of a registration of the heartbeat variation and the stress level. There is called the absolute stress vector, and it goes very much in rhythm. It's a working place meeting, and there are, as I follow, there are more, but there are 4 participants. And you can see it's very much in rhythm when they feel stress. And we had a very naive idea that that's something that we will find out also. But that's not what happened. When people come into the therapy, we do not at all have a kind of rhythmicity in how do we feel stress. And perhaps already this is a very important notion, that compared to usually group settings in which people come to talk together, we easily start to feel in the same rhythmicity the things. But when people come into therapy, for instance, a couple, they have a very different kind of experiences of the topics that are most stressful for them to speak. And in a way, perhaps one of the that happens in the process and targets is that we have some kind of rhythmicity in our body. There are some kind of rhythmicities because you can see that there are points in which the stress can be on the same moments, and of course these are very important to look at. Now I'm going to give you example of a couple that we call Heli and Lasse. They came into the treatment because of violence. Lasse has been violent to his wife Heli, and actually they have a very severe situation. Heli almost died in this situation. And Lasse has also been a part in our psychotherapy clinic. There is a group for perpetrators, and he has been part of that, and he has asked could they come together to talk in a couple therapy setting, and that's the process when this started. This is an illustration of I'm not going to go to detail, but this is each participant has 4 days time this heartbeat recorder, and there is the point of the therapy session. And in this analysis, red color means stress or kind of activities, bodily activities. And there are high points. They are often a kind of physical exercises. But these green lines are relaxations that are, and you can see the time of sleep also and relaxation. And of course, here is the main question: how do our body relax from a stressful situation? First notion is that we have realized that already now, there's one paper to be published that really the autonomic nervous system is in concordance with each other. In 9 cases of 10, there was a clear significant concordance between all when they were looked at in pairs. So already now we know that we really attune to each other in our autonomic nervous system when we are in the meetings. What is special, however, is that in this case, therapist concordance to each other was the lowest among any other couple, and it became also visible in the interview afterwards. In this first, I will show you examples of 2 sessions, the second one and the 6th one. And in the second one, it was very surprising because the highest stress was among other therapists. Heli and Lasse also could have very high point of stress in the topics of discussion, but this is not the usual way of doing. Perhaps it's a bit related with the idea that the concordance between the therapists was not that high in this research. Lasse's background has been that when he was 6, he never has been living with his father. His father disappeared from his life immediately after his birth. Mother was a single caregiver, but when he was 6, he remarried, and quite soon he realized that the new father did not accept him, and he moved to live to his grandmother. And the grandmother has been the primary caregiver for her, and the grandmother died 3 years ago, and that was the time when the violence also started in the family, so that we are dealing with very, very, very strong issues. And now, in this moment, we come to speak of the meaning. He has been spoken about it. And then a therapist, and he's a bit in his tears, and a therapist asked in the film, I'm the therapist asking, if she would hear our conversation, what we are having here, so what would she say if she had been here with us and listened to us? And Lasse say, I can't say, and start to cry heavily. Would she have some advice? And Lasse is more in his tears for you to give. Yes, perhaps only that everything going to be all right, since that's the way it has been too. How would you answer to her if she would be here to say this? I suppose nothing else than giving a hug to her. Yeah. And this is the description of what happens in the skin conductance, meaning we have 2, or actually nowadays they have 3 systems in our autonomic nervous system. We have this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. When we arouse, attune, so it's a kind of a sympathetic nervous system is working, and when we come down, calm down, it's the parasympathetic nervous system that is working, actually taking care that we really can overcome dreadful situation. And what happens here is that this is the point of conversation, and he is speaking here. Every now and then he goes very highly up, very strongly up, and these are the moments when he starts to cry. And this is the point of the last moment when the therapist asks, how would you respond to your grandmother? The same kind of arousal of the arousal happens by the wife a bit before, so it's very occupied, and there is my autonomic nervous system, so I come more and more up, But the very interesting point is that the other therapist is almost opposite. When he is aroused, so the other therapist is very relaxed, and now at this point he also very relaxing. This is also a bit surprised because we thought that the therapists are very much attuned in the same way, but that's not the case. So that, and perhaps that's a very good meaning in it, that when we are many therapists, so we can really focus on different issues. One can be much in his inner thoughts, and one can be very much attuned to each other in the setting. And very interesting is that when Jarl asked her, she has been listening to her husband with a very warm look at his eyes. But now when Jarl asked, what are your thoughts? Her response is not at all that warm, empathetic attunement to his husband. But what she says is that I think that he should learn that the family for him is our family, and not the family that he was living. Actually, it's a quite negative comment of the situation, and he becomes very aroused and stays there. He do not relax. She do not relax. He does not calm down. And of course, you can think that this is the traumatic experiences that being a victim of violence that is here. When things are spoken like this, so she really, the experience of being a victim of violence is there. And even if she shows some compassion in her face, that's something that she cannot submit to the other one in the spoken words. And also in the afterward, when this was in the interview afterwards, every 4 persons are interviewed individually, and there are shown 4 pieces of the session. And in that interview, she became surprised that she first said, yes, I think the same way, but then she started to think that, I wonder, why do I think in such a negative way of his family of origin situation? Okay, then we go for 6 months further, and they come into the 6th session, and it's again, there is the session in which we do the recordings of the autonomic nervous system. And it was very surprising start, because the 5th session has been very positive, and they were very much looking inwards, that they thought that they have solved their problems. But now when they come into the session start by Heli saying that she has been thinking that this is the end of our marriage. So it was very different kind of situation than we were living together. It was a very surprising situation for the therapist also. This is the skin conductance, and what happens here is that when she starts to speak, there is an enormous arousal in her skin conductance, but now you can see that the difference is that she also becomes relaxed, and that was not the case in the first session. And I also suppose that when she speaks of being so angry, that's something, a kind of relief compared to the situation that in the first session, when she was discussing, he stayed on this arousal in her body, but now she can be angry, and she can be in the emotion. And in this session, actually, for the first time, start to generate words. The husband seems not to have any reaction, but he has. You will see soon. You will understand why there seems not to be any reaction. The therapist again. This is so every now and then I become awake. Let's say it that way, and the other one not. Here, when you see the breathing, what happens to the breathing? When you look at the husband's breathing, he don't breathe at all during that. He's holding his breath all the time. And of course you can imagine what are the situations when you hold your breath. You are scared to death or something like that. Others' breathing are quite, of course, her breathing is a bit unrhythmic, but that's because when you speak, you cannot speak in that rhythm. This is the skin conductance again, and there is not so much visible here. And this is a kind of science that comes in a situation that the baby is in his lap, and he starts to touch the baby, and that's the movement. And of course, there was nothing visible in the baby, so that was smoothing himself. This is the Jarl, the therapist, making the question. So you can see that it was also a heavy issue for him to ask this situation. But here you can see the reaction in the breathing. And now the second therapist do not breathe at all. So that it's very superficial breathing on the whole. Okay, and only to come to end. This is very much in the middle of research process, but perhaps you have already now realized that there is a enormous amount of information of therapeutic settings that lives in our bodies and in our bodily expressions. There is many of who are making research of the synchronization of the body movements. And for instance, in the case of Lasse and Heli, in the very first session, it was a very unfortunate situation because the synchronization of the body movement seems to happen between three persons, between the therapists and Lasse, but not with Heli. Because of her traumatic experience, she was sitting very stoned. She did not have, even her utterances were very monological in a very monotonic tone, and it was not responded in the body movement or attunement by the therapist. And this is a very different situation in the end. So that, of course, it's very, very important question. How do we respond to the, let's say, most difficult participants in the therapist setting? Is it the case that they do not have the response in our body movements, or looking at eyes, or smile in the face? Smiling is the most important way how do we respond to each other, and there are also some who are doing a research of how do we respond to each other in smile and all those kind of things. But what we have noticed is that it happens every time, that it really is our autonomic nervous system start to be in concordance. There are variations. It may be a situation in which not all four are at the same time, and it varies from one topic to another. According to the stress situation, I did not give any example of that, but it seems to be the case that in a most stressful situation where the body is experiencing the stress, it's someone else who is speaking. And that was also very surprising to us to realize. Even if someone seems to be speaking of very heavy issues and start to cry, it's not so much he speaking that makes the stress of his body to arise, but it's the next comment by the therapist. And even a situation in which therapists are having reflective comments to each other is a very stressful situation for the client. Of course, stress as such is not bad. We need that. That's a part of it. But perhaps the question is that how much, what is the, as it's called, the window of the stress level that is best? How much, if it's too high, probably our clients are in a position to defend themselves, and they do not have any openness to receive what is said. In that way, it's very. And then to realize that, well, perhaps the last piece was a very good example of the non-rhythmicity between the therapists. So that the rhythmicity is not the naive rhythmicity that we thought to be in there in the beginning, but it's as perhaps exact in the way as Colvin Trovarten is speaking. It's just like rhythmicity, that it's a pam 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 pam, something like that between some participants. And it's very important that when there are two persons, someone feel the attunement to each other, even if someone else are not in the situation. Yeah, I think that was all for the time, and we can go on in the afternoon in the discussion. Thank you.